we are going to continue our series of 5 awesome reptiles per continent. And so this one, we're going to move into Asian reptiles. And so if you guys watched the previous one about European reptiles, you basically saw me throw on my dying hill of that Europe and Asia aren't really 2 continents, and there's a lot of crossover with the species. So basically, what I'm going to do, just to kind of clarify things moving forward, is that there may be some reptiles that are found in multiple areas, but I'm going to concentrate on them specifically per video, either because it makes more sense, or that's where they're originally from, or that's where they're mostly or most often found. So, with that being said, let's move into the softball choice, and that's what I'm also probably going to do a lot, is I'm going to do a couple easy ones, and then maybe a couple ones that not everybody's heard of or thinks about right away. Maybe even a controversial one or two. So, just get things started with that softball, leopard geckos. So, leopard geckos are one of the most popular pets, reptiles, just in the hobby. They obviously don't, well, I don't know, I shouldn't say obviously, but they may not hit that number 1 and 2 spot that are always being fought between ball pythons and bearded dragons, but leopard geckos have been around for a long time and they're very popular for a lot of good reasons. So these guys are found in Central Asia, basically from like Western India all the way through parts of Afghanistan, Pakistan, even parts of Iran. They're found in more kind of drier, scrub, rocky desert land. So like the parts of India where they're found, they're not quite as tropical as like the rest of like that little subcontinent peninsula of India. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily out in the desert, the blazing sun, like the rest of the desert reptiles that we've come to talk about in all of the different videos. So these guys are really cool. That being said, for the most part, leopard geckos in the hobby, both in the United States and everywhere else, are actually a mix of like of the 5 different subspecies. There's not a whole lot of real consistency of that, and even sometimes other species of their genus. There's a full 6, so there's 6 species of their genus that I'm going to butcher and not even going to attempt to say. So I'm just going to put it right here. So there are 6 species of that all make up the geckos that they get their name for, the true eyelids. These are the geckos that actually have the ability to fully open and close and blink their eyes. And then of that genus, of those 6 species, about 5 of them make up the different ones that we consider leopard geckos. So essentially most of the geckos we have in the hobby are mutts. These guys are really cool. They're insectivores and they are fairly nocturnal. A lot of the time they will spend outside of the really hot sun or the really cool winters, and they do go through a period of brumation because it does get really cold, because those high deserts or deserts in general usually get pretty cold for part of the year, and so they kind of partially brumate as well. But when it's not really hot out, they'll come out, they'll get a little bit of warmth off the radiance of those rocks, and then they'll go out and hunting for insects as well as looking for other little leopard geckos to go canoodle with. Now, we all know that they make great pets. We all know that, as long as their husband's dialed in, they can live 7, 10 plus years. That being said, that was a weird voice crack. There is a lot of conflicting information about leopard gecko care. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. So for the most part, for a long time, we consider them exclusively nocturnal. I can't talk today. Hopefully I'll get over this. That they are solitary, that they don't need UVB light, and they only get to a certain size. Well, a lot of that is backed up with old, research and documentation going on in the wild. But as we know with a lot of other species, that initial research and documentation isn't always necessarily correct. And it takes a lot of consistency and revisions and reevaluating to learn more about them. Other parts of it might be that, for a long time we have holdouts of the care in the reptile pet industry. That's why we still have heat rocks sold even in reptile specialty stores. This, the care that we, learn and develop, sometimes the products and the old way of thinking takes a long time of fighting to reevaluate. So that is strictly nocturnal, the living alone, as we've found more further researching and further documenting in the wild, we're finding that they actually live in kind of loose but fairly structured colonies. So they do come in contact with each other, even sharing den sites fairly regularly with relatives and non-relatives. We find that they are acting a little bit more crepuscular, where they have been found more in the dusk and in the very, very early mornings. Every once in a while, they'll actually find them out in full daylight, but under not as extreme weather conditions. And then, now that we're looking more in the pet industry, we're looking at more advancing husbandry, we're also seeing that they do benefit from UVB light, and they do benefit from a more crepuscular lifestyle. Although that may just because they are adapting to captive conditions versus wild conditions. So just going to leave that with the leopard geckos. As with all the reptiles you ever choose to get, just make sure you do a lot of research with them. And with the ones that we've been taking care of for a very long time, there's just always going to be a lot of conflicting information. And final fun fact about leopard geckos: these guys might actually be the very first lizard that was ever domesticated. I know that domesticating reptiles is a whole bleh thing, but these guys might have been around the absolute longest. I couldn't find an exact date on that, but every source seems to say that these guys are like the OGs of pet lizards. This next one is another one of kind of like the archetype, stereotypical, like, okay, when I think of a super pretty snake, which one is it when it comes to keeping one in the pet hobby? And that is the Mandarin rat snake. So these guys are actually fairly widespread. They're found kind of basically all throughout Eastern Asia, from like Eastern India all the way into China and Taiwan. However, they occupy very specific habitats. So even though they're fairly widespread, they are fairly common, but you just can't find them everywhere. They get their name from, albeit a fairly antiquated and I'm not super happy about, Mandarin, i.e. Chinese. Although again, they're found everywhere, but primarily that's where they were first found by Westerners and bringing them into the hobby. They have that really cool striking gray, black, and yellow pattern. They look beautiful. I'd love to get some one day, but I have to really kind of dial back the amount of species that I keep for a little while. With that being said, these guys, in addition to their beautiful pattern, they're a pretty good sized snake. They don't get huge, about that 4-foot-ish range. So like a lot of smaller to medium sized rat snakes, that 3 to 4 foot range, females getting a little bit bigger. That very specific climate that I'm talking about, these guys are found a little bit more altitude, a little bit cooler climates. So things like the beauty snakes and a lot of the ones that are found in like the rhino rat snakes, they're found a little bit lower down in still kind of at a little bit cooler elevations, because overall it's cooler in Asia than it is in the Americas or in Africa, even in the more temperate, even in the more humid areas that are more considered rainforest. It's still a bit cooler, but they're found a little bit more elevation. Honestly, kind of think about like panda type thing. Not quite as high, but think bamboo forest, think a little bit hilly savanna, those type of things, as I just fumble over that whole little mess. These guys had a reputation for a very long time for being impossible to keep as a pet, and there's a very good reason for that. For a very long time, almost every single one was an import, and most of those weren't kept from farms like we get from a lot of like African or Indonesian species, where they're wild caught and then they're raised on farms, and then some are born, they keep a few, and then they export the rest. They were almost all exclusively found in wet markets or the food markets. So they're ones that were gone out and foraged for, essentially for food for people. And a lot of people can't eat snake. Rattlesnake is a not so uncommon exotic meat even here in the United States, but that's where most of them came from. And they're not exactly thinking of the animal's long-term welfare. So the animals would come in, they would be dehydrated, they wouldn't have water for sometimes weeks and weeks, and that can do irreparable damage. That being said, in the last probably 8-9 years, a lot of people have been able to successfully breed them in captivity, and we don't really have to worry about that. In fact, a lot of people are able to keep Mandarin rat snakes successfully, and even people who are a little bit more amateurish, like me for instance, have been able to also reproduce them in captivity, thus being able to have a much more sturdy, healthy animal that you are able to enjoy. If you want to keep these as a pet, just kind of remember, keep that Asian rat snake mentality. A little bit cooler temps. Try not to get them over above 85-ish. Give them some places to climb. They do like to bury and hide. They are fairly fossorial, so you're not going to see them a whole lot, but you will see them more than, say, like the Thai bamboo rat snakes, like, the really nice black and red ones. These guys are a little bit bigger, and once they get settled in, you will see them out and about a little bit more often than you would, say, for one of those. This next one is probably, at least in recent years, the most iconic other than the leopard gecko. One that you think of when you think of a gecko, and that is its name. the tokay gecko, whose Latin name is gecko, and it's named for that for a very specific reason. That's the sound it makes. It literally goes gecko when it yells at you. So these guys are fairly widespread. They're found a lot throughout Southeast Asia, into Indonesia, and even parts of like the Philippines and a lot of little island areas as well. They are a very large gecko. They're arguably like the third largest gecko, with the Leachianus and the large leaf-tail geckos. The leaf-tails usually get a little bit longer. The Leachianus are very heavy body, but these tokay geckos are very, very large. Like I said, probably the third largest. They're found throughout a lot of like the rice paddies. They are found in forests. They are found in recent years in a lot of human habitation around human dwellings as well. They are known to be those very large blue color with the red dots, and have that very cantankerous attitude. And they will let you know if you were to go out. And actually, Dave Kaufman does a really cool video. I absolutely recommend going to watch that. He is there with a couple people, and he's finding wild tokay geckos. I say this because they're in and around human habitation, and he's finding these tokay geckos. They are very nocturnal. I would say out of all of the geckos that we normally keep, they are arguably the most nocturnal of the species, where they're found almost exclusively at night, but they do like it a little bit warmer. So the way you normally keep like a crested gecko or similar at more room temperature, the tokays do like a little bit of heat. And they eat everything. Basically, if they are smaller than its head, they will eat it. They will eat smaller tokays. They will eat little house geckos. They'll eat all sorts of insects. They just kind of eat whatever. And as I mentioned before, they have that, that cantankerous little attitude. I ended up actually taking a tokay home because it latched onto my finger and wouldn't let go, and the store was closing, and they just sent it home with me. So they do kind of have that attitude. But see, whole thing. I was getting better, but whatever. With that being said, more people are starting to breed them in captivity with much more success. So much so that a lot of patterns and morphs are starting to pop out, including greens and reds and powdered blues and piebalds and all this crazy stuff, as well as their attitudes are starting to simmer down a little bit too. So a lot of the tokay geckos that you'll see at that more inexpensive price and with that more flighty and bitey personality are more those imports that aren't used to human interactions through generational, essentially just putting up with. They are a really cool gecko. I have one. I don't show her off a whole lot because she is really flighty. She's, that like $30 wild import. But that's perfectly fine. I think she's really cool. I like going over there at night when she's out, and I will see her hunting around for those. With that being said, in some of the island localities, like around the Philippines and places like that, tokay geckos do play a big and significant part of like Eastern medicines, where a lot of animals are part of that Eastern medicine trade, and they are being essentially harvested or collected, although in this case I think that first one was more correct, for those medicinal purposes, so much so that they're actually being considered vulnerable on those specific island populations, where they're actually starting to be listed into the CITES, where they won't be illegal to export anymore because they still are so abundant in the rest of the world, especially mainland Asia, but they need to start being more regulated, so much so because they are being just completely decimated on these island populations. I touched on this one a little bit at the end of the Mandarin rat snake, and so this one is the bamboo rat snake. So these guys are really cool, and honestly, I'll probably getting one. If I were to get any of the snakes, it would be this one before the Mandarin rat, probably because it's a little bit more inexpensive as well, depending on the subspecies. So they call them the bamboo rat snakes, and there are 4 different subspecies in the hobby. There are a couple more out in the wild, and they may be in the hobby too, but there are 4 main ones that we really think about and have here, at least here in the States, in the actual hobby. These guys are found in the kind of Middle Asia and China and Taiwan and places like that. And these guys are the ones that are truly found in elevation. So remember before where I said think pandas? No, for real. The bamboo ones are specifically named that because they are often found in bamboo forests, in those at elevation, so over 3,000 feet, which doesn't seem like a lot for even me here in Colorado, but that's decent sized elevation in a lot of other parts of the world where there's a lot of fog, where there's a lot of humidity, where it's cooler weather, and there's a lot of evergreen forests and bamboo ones. And that's where they're found, in those rocky rolling hills at elevation at cooler weather. They are really cool, and like I said, there's 4 different subspecies. The most expensive one in the hobby, as well as the largest one, the females can get almost 40 inches long, which is huge for the bamboo rat snakes. But most of the ones, like there's the Thai bamboo and I believe the Chinese red are the 2 most common ones, I believe. Don't quote me on that. Go check out the Asian rat snake video that I did. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about them than I did with these guys right now. But they are a really, really cool species. They are very fossorial, so they were often found under moss, under logs. They hide a lot. They're very nocturnal. And in the hobby, a lot of people in the end don't actually like keeping them because, number one, they have to stay cool, like 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is insane for most people. Like, a lot of people don't like their corn snakes getting, and they're like their North American colubrids getting down in the 60s. But they truly do like that. Outside of brumation or whatever may have you, but they do like those cooler temps. And so, like, with a lot of amphibians and a lot of other Asian species, over 85 is lethal for them. You don't want to get that. You can cause a lot of irreversible damage if you get them that hot for long periods of time. And the other issue is that they are very fossorial. So they don't need large enclosures, but they need some with very deep substrate, very moist substrate with a lot of moss. But again, not like swampy, because that can cause a lot of issues. So it takes a little bit more of an experienced hand to kind of dial that in. It would even take me a little while to do a little bit more research into the specific subspecies and have the setup up and ready to go before you actually get it. Which is honestly where I like to, this is going to be a little bit of a tangent really quick, but this is actually one that I like to talk about, which is for your setups and everything. I like to think of it in kind of like the aquarium mentality, where you get your aquarium set up and let it run for a little while before you put the fish in there. Do that with your setup as well, I think, especially for some of these more advanced species or the ones that just need a little bit more of an experienced eye and hand to them. Get the setup ready to go and monitor the temps and humidities for a couple weeks and then get the animal. Like, you find an amorph market, you say, okay, I'll get it, and it'll ship out in 2 weeks, perfect. You'll already be working on your setup at that point, if not have it already ready to go. So that was my little penny for my thoughts rant really quick. But these guys are really cool. I do like them a lot. They are they're the panda of the reptile world. I just think they're really cool, and one of these days I'll get one. All right, this last one is very controversial. I will give you that, but I do have reasons for putting it on this list about what makes a good pet reptile, just not necessarily the best pet reptile for everybody. So if you haven't quite gotten there yet, Asian water monitor. Now hear me out. They can be very good pets. So these guys are basically found from like all of coastal India, all through the rest of Eastern Asia, all into Indonesia and a lot of parts there, even getting into the parts like close to near Komodo parts of Indonesia, right? These guys are very large. As their name implies, Asian water monitor. They're found around water, both fresh and salt water. A lot of estuaries, ponds, coastal areas. They are, like I said, they're very large. They're in that like 3rd to 2nd largest. They outweigh the crocodile monitors, but the crocodile monitors do get longer, just like they get longer than the Komodo dragons, but the Komodo dragons do outweigh all of them. And there are varying island and mainland localities that make them larger or smaller than others in different subspecies of Varanus salvator. They are great swimmers. They're great sprinters. Young ones can climb very well, and as we've all seen from that amazing video, that even the older, larger ones do try to climb too. They're always impressive. Either, in viral videos of them, climbing through climbing through supermarkets, trying to get into houses at that front door, fighting in the streets, or even, on like Jay Brewer's videos, and Brian has one, and on the Disney Channel, which is Jay's, but they can be very charismatic animals. And so this is where I'm going to get into that. So for the most part, we're talking more about captive bred animals. they have been able to reproduce in captivity here in the States and elsewhere for a very long time with great success. And with every generation, they seem to be getting closer and closer to what we would consider true domesticity, where they're still a reptile, they're still very, very reactive, very defensive, and they are still reptiles. They are essentially apex predators. They'll eat anything, as domestic ones as well as in the wild. But in domesticity, they are a little bit more charismatic. They're more tolerant. They are highly intelligent. Monitor lizards are, and really all varanids are, I don't even really want to say arguably. I would be willing to bet that they are the most intelligent reptile species. They remember individuals, patterns, times, colors. They spot train, they target train, they position and train. They have individual people they like more than others. They are amazing pets, but they get very large. They take a lot of patience and a lot of experience. So if you were someone who wanted to dedicate a huge amount of space, a lot of time, a lot of research, then these guys are great. They're amazing pets. Pets to where they know when you come into the room because they have that big forked tongue that comes out just like the snake that gathers the particles. They remember individual people's scents, the times, everything like that. They are amazing, amazing pets for the right person. So if you want to dedicate your time, a little bit of extra chunk of money specifically for a domesticated one, a captive bred one, a lot of space, a good varied diet, and patience to work with one, I would argue that they would be the best pet, not the easiest to keep, not the best for everybody, but the most personable pet reptile, even more than, say, like a bearded dragon or a tegu. Just not for everybody. And that's the biggest takeaway from this. And also, I will say this, we all have our opinions about everybody, but if I were to ever get a water monitor, I would get one from Kevin McCurley. You cannot deny that dude knows water monitor behavior, and he does a very good job of working with them. So with that being said, that's my defense about why I decided to put the water monitors on the top 5, or just 5, I should say. I don't like the top 5. The 5 good Asian pets. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, want to yell at me about that one, put it down in the comments below. Just please keep it civil. If you have any, ideas for future videos, I am still planning on doing all of the continents. I'm going to divide them up a little bit. So I just did Asian reptiles. I mostly want to talk about mainland Asia. The next one is going to be a lot of the islands. So a lot of Indonesia and Papua New Guinea, that stuff. That's the next one. So I'm going to call that one maybe pet reptiles of Southeast Asia, because it's not just Indonesia. That's a country. There's other ones. But I'm going to do a lot of that. The last video about the cool reptiles from North America didn't do as well. Maybe I did it too close to the last one, but I'm going to do another one of those. If you guys like that, I'll keep doing that. If you can, please check out my Patreon. It helps add to everything going on here, as well as you get a lot of previews about what I'm doing, projects that I'm doing, animals that I haven't shared with anybody, and you get a lot of really cool prizes, including wristbands, t-shirts, private tours, talks, all that other fun stuff. So hope you're having a great day. Hope you're enjoying the series. I'll probably make an entire separate playlist of just the 5 reptiles of the continents, as well as the regular playlist of just the top 5 lists. If you want to check out both of those, helps with the click-through rate for YouTube. Thank you kindly. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll check you next time.